Imagine an America where doctors promoted cigarettes and children played with ultra-realistic rifles on public streets. These are the forgotten, unbelievable truths of the 1970s, a decade that treated profound risk with a casual shrug. The danger was part of the thrill. Before modern safety standards, a toy's mesmerizing, chaotic rhythm was the true soundtrack of an era, until the shattering plastic balls became a projectile hazard, reflecting a society where the thrill of risk often won over caution. The 1970s was defined by a vibrant recklessness, a spirit that even extended to toys. Among the many fads, few were as hypnotic or as genuinely dangerous as the clackers. Recall a time when plastic, used in things like Oldsmobile parts and asbestos, was seen as the miracle material of the future. This confidence in chemistry sometimes overshadowed caution. Clackers, composed of two hard, acrylic balls, were the must-have item. The goal was simple: to master the rhythmic chaos by shaking the ring until the two spheres clashed continuously, generating a rapid, percussive sound. The satisfaction was unparalleled. It was a personal test of skill. But this acrylic idol possessed a fatal flaw. The intense friction and pressure during maneuvers caused the brittle plastic to fatigue. It would suddenly shatter in an explosion of physics, sending razor-sharp fragments rocketing outward like unforeseen missiles. What began as a game could instantly become a trip to the emergency room, resulting in painful lacerations or injuries to the eye. Parents, bewildered, swiftly responded. Teachers banned the devices. Authorities intervened, pulling clackers from shelves. The ban on this novelty was an early sign that the era of unfettered freedom was beginning its slow retreat. The rhythmic clack was replaced by a resounding silence, a casualty of the decade's realization that the line between thrilling amusement and genuine hazard was too thin. The legacy of the clacker perfectly encapsulates the 1970s itself, an initial, dazzling promise of unbridled fun that contained a hidden, painful cost. The King's Kiss, a breach of the velvet ropes. It was a strange mix of funny and creepy in hindsight. The television game show, once a stage for innocent competition, harbored a custom where celebrity hosts blurred the line between glamour and intimacy, transforming a winning moment into an obligatory public display of affection. In the golden age of daytime television, the medium was a warm extension of the family living room. Shows like Family Feud were rituals, connecting homes to Hollywood. This era was characterized by unquestioning deference to celebrity and a lack of defined workplace boundaries, extending to the airplanes where TWA stewardesses were held to impossible standards. The reigning monarch of this custom was Richard Dawson, the host of Family Feud. Dawson was a television phenomenon who turned the game into a personal showcase. His signature gesture was the kiss. He bestowed a kiss upon virtually every female contestant. This act, which today would spark profound public debate, was then met with blushes, giggles, and applause. It was seen as charming, a playful mark of personal attention, part of the show's contract. Imagine winning a life-changing prize, only to realize the final stage involved a ritual you never agreed to. Contestants were simply expected to comply. Looking back, this custom offers a glimpse into shifting public morality. The 1970s was a period of vast social change, yet rules rooted in an older code gave leeway to the powerful. The lines concerning professional conduct and personal space, meticulously defined today, did not yet exist. As the decade drew to a close, society began to reconsider these casual arrangements. As voices advocating for personal autonomy grew louder, television networks were compelled to become cautious. Dawson's ritual, once primetime gold, slowly became viewed as anachronistic. The act that once made Richard Dawson the kissing bandit of television had to be set aside. The host's kiss remains a strange, indelible stamp on history, a final, bewildering reminder of how casually the line between celebrity and spectator was once drawn. The open road, riding the steel roller coaster. The feeling was like a roller coaster, but completely free. Before seatbelt laws became doctrine, The truck bed was a forbidden playground, an open-air theater offering freedom that now seems like a perilous relic of a simpler, more reckless age. In the 1970s, the pickup truck was a symbol of independence, a tool of labor that doubled as an impromptu leisure conveyance. Its bed, today reserved for cargo, was then considered prime seating. This visceral experience contrasted with the interiors of luxury cars like the Oldsmobile Cutlass. Just as people were inhaling asbestos, they were accepting the palpable danger of the open road for exhilaration. To a child, the truck bed was an uncontrolled zone. There were no seat belts, just the bare steel floor. You would pile in with cousins, holding on to the metal lip for dear life. This was a time when the rules of physics were forgotten in favor of the sensory thrill. The appeal was undeniable. It offered a unique wind-in-your-hair intimacy. You could wave frantically at trailing cars or lie flat, watching the clouds drift by. It was a sensation of absolute liberation. Yet, this reckless freedom was built upon a foundation of risk. Consequences were rarely considered until they became reality. Failing to hold on tightly meant being expelled from the vehicle. Hospitals and lawmakers began collecting data, linking the joy of the open truck bed to a clear pattern of severe injuries. The realization dawned that this practice was a profound hazard. This ushered in a firm shift in public policy. By the 1990s, most states banned the transportation of children in a truck bed. Today, the sight of a child enjoying the steel roller coaster of the truck bed would lead to immediate intervention. The truck bed ride remains a potent, if perilous, memory, a perfect symbol of a time when the most cherished freedoms were the most ill-advised. Facing backward, the spy movie seat. Back then, fun was more important than physics. For the suburban child of the 1970s, the backward-facing station wagon seat was the dream perch on the highway, a solitary, glass-encased world where you could wave faces at trailing traffic, unaware that you were occupying the car's most profoundly vulnerable crash zone. The American station wagon was the ultimate symbol of domesticity. It was the trusted vehicle for the long vacation. While the parents enjoyed the front seat, perhaps listening to an 8-track tape or discussing Family Feud with host Richard Dawson, the children were sequestered in the rear, often installed to face the window. This unique seating arrangement was less about transport and more about containment and entertainment. It granted the young passenger an unparalleled panoramic view, transforming a highway journey into a spectacle. The experience was akin to being on a slow-moving fairground ride. There were no seat belts, only a metal handle to grasp. The true joy was the unspoken interaction with other vehicles. Children would spend hours waving or making funny faces, creating the sensation of being in a spy movie chase. For the parents, it was convenience. The children were quiet and out of sight. However, beneath this veneer of nostalgic freedom, a stark physical reality existed. The hazard was intrinsic to the design. In a rear-end collision, passengers in that third row were positioned directly in the crush zone. The lack of proper restraints meant any impact could result in devastating whiplash. As engineering advanced, the calculus of risk shifted. It became undeniably clear that fun could no longer outweigh physics. The chaotic ride of the rear-facing seat was retired, superseded by mandatory crash safety regulations. The station wagon's rear-facing seat now stands as a clear monument to a different era of travel, a beloved memory, but a practice that could not survive the modern imperative for safety. The airborne ashtray, glamour at 30,000 feet. No matter how glamorous the idea of flying seemed, air travel, once the pinnacle of sophistication, was paradoxically poisoned by the very habits its passengers embraced. The smoke-thick cabin air turned every flight into a health hazard, blurring the line between the smoking and non-smoking section into a cruel, shared reality. The 1970s marked a fascinating inflection point in commercial aviation. Flying had become more accessible, yet it retained a profound aura of glamour. Stepping onto an aircraft from a carrier like Transworld Airlines felt akin to walking into an exclusive club, a feeling reinforced by the immaculate appearance of the hostesses. Despite the elegance, the air in the cabin was, literally, thick with cigarette smoke. Smoking was not just permitted, It was integrated into the travel experience. Ashtrays were built into every single armrest. The ritual of lighting up immediately after boarding was common. Passengers would settle in, perhaps reaching for the complimentary cigarettes that some airlines even offered. The fiction of the smoking section was a profound deception. A small curtain was the only barrier. Ventilation systems ensured the smoke from the back rows quickly permeated the entire vessel. Infants and individuals with pulmonary concerns were all forced to endure what amounted to a shared, high-altitude smoking lounge. This was a profound reflection of a society slow to acknowledge the long-term consequences of smoking. Even as medical evidence emerged, the powerful influence of advertising, which featured doctors endorsing specific cigarette brands, lent an unquestioned air of acceptability. Eventually, the rising volume of health concerns, coupled with increasing complaints, compelled a change. By the mid-1980s, airlines began implementing initial divisions of smoking areas. The complete ban on domestic flights soon followed. The airborne ashtray is a dramatic reminder that even the most exclusive environments were once compromised by habits we now deem entirely unacceptable. The quiet removal of those integrated armrest ashtrays signaled a definitive end to this particular form of gilded, toxic glamour. If you remember that haze at 30,000 feet, you know this story is true. Hit the like button and leave a comment. Did you have to sit next to the smoking section? The silent poison, colors that damaged generations. An invisible hazard hidden behind vibrant and friendly colors. Lead-based paint, cheap and brilliant, was a toxin cleverly disguised as childhood wonder. It coated everything from toys to walls, a neurotoxin silently accumulating in generations of young lives, an unseen menace lurking within the home. The post-war American home was defined by an explosion of color. Manufacturers favored lead-based paint because of its remarkable properties. Bright, affordable, and durable. This material was celebrated, seen as a technological marvel, akin to the plastic used in toys like clackers or the pervasive presence of fire-retardant asbestos. Lead paint was used everywhere, from siding to windowsills. It adorned wooden toy trains and children's furniture. This ubiquity created an insidious problem, particularly for the youngest occupants. As toddlers explored their world, they chewed on accessible surfaces, ingesting the poison directly. The threat was compounded as the paint aged. It chipped, flaked, and powdered into the household dust, making its way into the bloodstream and the developing brain. Lead is a potent neurotoxin, and its buildup led to developmental challenges and cognitive impairment in young children. The connection between the brilliant paint and the health crisis was either missed or acted upon with agonizing slowness. Manufacturers were hesitant to concede that a staple of domestic comfort was an endangerment. It took years of sustained public health outcry to force a change. It was not until the year 1978 that the United States government finally banned lead-based paint for use in homes. By then, the damage had been done. The ban represented a profound ethical turning point. The legacy of lead paint is a stark metaphor for the era's blindness to its own comfort. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest threats are not the visible dangers, like the rough chaos of a truck bed ride, but the silent, unseen poisons hidden behind a perfectly painted surface. The paddle's shadow, discipline behind the desk. A SWAT on the rear was considered discipline, not abuse. The classroom, meant to be a place of quiet learning, was ruled by an instrument of fear, symbolized by the wooden paddle hanging behind the teacher's desk, a chilling reminder of corporal punishment as standard policy. For generations, the schoolhouse mirrored the rigid structure of society. Just as rules were fiercely guarded against the hot pants trend, the school teacher was the undisputed authority, backed by the blunt instrument, the paddle. This was sanctioned policy in many American school districts. These were often large, flat pieces of wood, sometimes crafted with deliberate holes, designed to increase the sting. Those holes weren't for aerodynamics. They were designed, terrifyingly, to pop against the skin, delivering maximum sting. Every child knew the sound of that pop. The paddle hung openly, acting as a permanent, silent warning. The philosophy was captured by the old adage, spare the rod and spoil the child. If a child misbehaved, the procedure was direct. The student would be called to the front, and told to bend over, submitting to the punishment, often in front of the entire class. Parents who had experienced similar discipline supported the practice. However, over the course of the 1970s, medical experts argued that the deliberate infliction of physical discomfort did not foster a productive learning environment. They observed that the paddle often instilled fear and anxiety. This rising chorus of voices began to chip away at the traditions. Gradually, state by state, the policies were repealed. By the late 1980s, most states prohibited corporal punishment. The shift was driven by a dawning realization that the most effective way to foster capable adults was through educational methods rooted in understanding. The removal of the paddle marked the quiet conclusion of a long-standing, painful chapter. It was a victory for a more compassionate understanding of childhood, and a reminder that true authority rests on mentorship, not merely muscle. The doctor's endorsement, smoking in the white coat. If your doctor smokes, how bad can it be? In a staggering betrayal of public trust, the very figures sworn to health became pitchmen for cigarettes, appearing on screen to calm consumer fears, showing how deep the tobacco industry's influence once ran in the golden age of broadcasting. The advertising landscape of the 1970s was a wild, unregulated territory. Before widespread bans, cigarettes were ubiquitous. As medical concerns began to surface, the industry sought the ultimate countermeasure, the endorsement of the medical professional. In many promotions, these were actual licensed practitioners or convincing figures embodying their authority, who told the public which brand was gentler on the throat. It is a bizarre contradiction. The caregiver, who administered inoculations, now actively recommended a product we know to be harmful. The effectiveness of this advertising was rooted in the automatic trust that the white coat commanded. Tobacco companies capitalized on this, creating advertisements that depicted medical practitioners enjoying a cigarette. It was a calculated strategy to instill confidence and neutralize public skepticism. This era of medical endorsement was a profound ethical low point. As lung cancer rates escalated, the pretense that smoking was benign collapsed. By the late 1970s, public outrage compelled regulators to intervene. Networks were forced to eliminate virtually all cigarette advertising, ending the era where a tobacco company could purchase the image of medical approval. The sudden disappearance of the white coats was a pivotal moment. It signaled the complete erosion of that manufactured trust, leaving behind the stark, unadorned Surgeon General's warning. This history reminds us that even the most respected professions can be swept up in commercial recklessness. The Sky Fashion Show, stewardesses, and the steep price of glamour. The glamour came at a steep price. Flying required more than just a ticket. It demanded a spectacle. The women serving the drinks were hired not for skill, but for their appearance, bound by rigid rules of youth, weight, and marital status, making the sky a runway where image was everything, and personal freedom was nothing. In the 1970s, the job of the air hostess was intrinsically tied to the grand illusion of air travel. Carriers like Trans World Airlines cultivated an image of sleek sophistication, and their cabin crews were the living embodiment of that promise. They were often referred to as Sky Girls, a title that underscored the image-driven nature of their role. The requirements for this elite workforce were strikingly different from other professions. Candidates were judged on strict aesthetic criteria, not service expertise. Companies openly enforced height requirements, weight checks, and meticulous makeup standards, turning the pre-flight routine into a rigorous beauty pageant. Uniforms were designed to be fashionable first and practical second. Miniskirts and go-go boots were common attire. The message was clear. These women were part of the entertainment, a decorative element, much like the customs of hosts like Richard Dawson on television. The price for this manufactured glamour was an almost total forfeiture of personal autonomy. Hostesses were often required to be single and could be dismissed if they married or became pregnant. Their entire career hinged on maintaining a specific youthful image. As the feminist movement gained traction, this system faced intense scrutiny. Women within the profession initiated lawsuits challenging these policies, arguing that their roles should be recognized as professional service careers, not as a temporary physical performance. The legal battles were difficult, but they brought change. Rules softened, and uniforms became more practical. The job title evolved to the professional flight attendant. The shift marked an end to the sky fashion show. The miraculous, invisible killer, asbestos' silence. You probably never saw it. And that's the scariest thing. Asbestos, the miracle material, fireproof, cheap, and everywhere, was an invisible threat in schools and homes. A ticking clock of toxicity, inhaled by generations who simply trusted the walls and ceilings around them. The 1970s were defined by a faith in industrial science, a confidence in perfect, lasting solutions for everything from comfortable travel on Oldsmobile automobiles to safe, fireproof construction. At the heart of this was asbestos, a mineral heralded for its qualities. Highly effective at insulation, durable, and flame-resistant. To the construction industry, it was an economic miracle, widely available and inexpensive. Asbestos became ubiquitous in ceiling tiles, insulation, and woven into fire curtains. People spent their entire days surrounded by this product, trusting their environment was secure. The danger, however, was in the microscopic fiber. As these materials aged, invisible fibers would drift into the air, silently inhaled. Students sat in classrooms while cleaners swept floors dusted with the substance. For decades, the public was largely unaware of the hazard, even as they became conscious of risks like the dangers of a truck bed ride or the toxic effects of lead paint. Scientific studies about the substances linked to severe pulmonary conditions began to emerge, but they were minimized by powerful industry interests. The economic convenience of the product, much like the convenience of doctor-endorsed cigarettes, was a powerful incentive to maintain the illusion of safety. Lawsuits began to expose the truth. The inhalation of these fibers was directly linked to life-altering diseases. These legal battles forced the truth into the public's consciousness. The government was compelled to respond. Today, strict regulations govern the material, and buildings must undergo costly abatement procedures. The story of asbestos is a powerful parable of the era's unchecked industrial optimism. It is a chilling reminder that the greatest hazards can be the ones we willingly embrace for convenience. The resulting health crisis proved that while the risk of the 1970s was often visible, the most profound dangers were only detected after the passing of time. Neon and vice, the gritty heart of Times Square. It was a jungle of sin lit by neon. Before the age of family-friendly tourism, Times Square was New York's unapologetic dark heart, a nocturnal landscape of squalor and flashing signs that hinted at whispers behind the glass, embodying the rough, untamed authenticity of the era. Times Square, today a vibrant hub of consumerism, was a profoundly different place in the 1970s, a contradiction of dazzling light and deep shadow. It stood as a gritty, unpolished monument to urban life, far removed from the pristine experience found on television with host Richard Dawson. The square was dominated by adult theaters, shadowy bars, and the ubiquitous peep shows. These establishments offered coin-operated voyeurism, existing out in the open. It was dark, noisy, and often unsanitary. The visibility of this commerce gave Times Square a reputation as rough, authentic New York. Yet hidden beneath the neon, the atmosphere fostered genuine problems. The surrounding areas were plagued by crime and exploitation. The unbridled liberty of the era, the same spirit that saw children allowed to ride unrestrained in the back of a pickup truck, found its decadent, grown-up manifestation here. For many artists, this rawness was a source of inspiration. But for the city's authorities, the squalor became an undeniable liability. They recognized that this prominent location, the crossroads of the world, could not remain mired in decay. The transformation was relentless. Beginning in the 1980s, the city government undertook redevelopment efforts. The old theaters were shuttered, the peep shows dismantled, and the rough character systematically replaced by chain stores and family entertainment. The result is the Times Square we know today. Bright, clean, and meticulously ordered. But for those who remember its previous incarnation, the change evokes a nostalgia for the complex, dangerous authenticity that was sacrificed for public order. The armed playgrounds, ultra-realistic war games. The 1970s was the Wild West of toy advertising. Playtime was dangerously real. Children brandished plastic rifles so detailed they mimicked wood grain and bolt action, an innocent fantasy that ended when the line between a toy and a real gun was blurred and a real threat blurred, leading to tragic misjudgments by law enforcement. The culture of the 1970s embraced a rough, unfiltered realism. This realism seeped into the toy market, a sprawling, unregulated domain. Children's imagination was fueled by detailed, miniaturized instruments of war. These were not the harmless foam blasters. These were ultra-realistic replicas, plastic rifles and handguns manufactured with meticulous attention to detail. The toy industry's goal was clear: to offer complete immersive fantasy. Children, dressed in camouflage, would spend hours engaging in war games. For them, it was innocent heroism, a continuation of the spirit that drove their imagination while riding in the rear-facing station wagon seat. Parents generally saw the practice as harmless. However, the pursuit of photorealistic authenticity carried a profound cost. The toys were so convincing that the distinction between play and peril became impossible in public. Stories spread, unsettling accounts of police officers mistaking the toy weapons for genuine, immediate threats. The realization was stark: innocent play could no longer be visually indistinguishable from danger. By the 1990s, the shift in public safety mandates was firm. New regulations required toy weapons to be manufactured with brightly colored orange tips. This simple alteration was a necessary boundary. The retirement of the ultra-realistic toy rifle marked an end to unrestrained play. The ban was a painful admission that in the modern world, the fantasy of heroism was no longer worth the risk of a real-life confrontation that could change a child's trajectory forever. Hot pants and public decorum, the park dress code. These pants, with their maximum shortness, became a symbol of freedom. Fashion in the 1970s was a cultural battleground. The rise of hot pants, a brazen symbol of liberation, collided head-on with traditional, conservative views of public parks, where a woman's attire was deemed an inappropriate distraction. The 1970s ushered in an era of sartorial transformation. Clothing became a powerful medium for self-expression. This was true for women's fashion, which moved past restrictive silhouettes. Just as the era embraced freedom in transportation, it also permitted an unrestrained confidence in clothing. The hot pants trend was the most electrifying manifestation of this liberty. Defined by their brevity, these short shorts were a bold visual statement, challenging norms of public modesty. They represented youthful rebellion. However, not every corner of society welcomed this display. The public park, traditionally reserved for families, became the nexus of this conflict. Park authorities viewed the brief, revealing nature of hot pants as a direct affront to public decorum. In certain communities, these shorts were effectively outlawed. The justification was rooted in social anxiety. Authorities argued the attire was too revealing, potentially causing discomfort to families and disrupting the atmosphere. A woman's personal fashion choice was treated as a legal violation. This led to awkward confrontations. Women wearing hot pants might be stared at or instructed to leave the premises. The idea of being penalized for fashionable attire highlights the curious contradictions of an era that preached freedom yet maintained strict control. The debate over hot pants was ultimately about the control of the female image. It was a clear parallel to the battle waged by the stewardesses who fought for professional recognition. Pinball's moral hazard, the gateway to sin. A world full of flashing lights, the clinking sound of colliding balls. The pinball machine, a vibrant icon of modern youth entertainment, was paradoxically treated like a moral threat. Authorities feared the game of skill and luck was a gateway to gambling, deeming the arcade too corrupting. The 1970s ushered in a revolutionary age of electronic leisure. Arcades became the dazzling destination for teenagers. At the heart of this scene was the pinball machine. With its elaborate art and flashing lights, pinball was a celebration of chance and dexterity. This passion for the silver ball was an innocent expression of youth culture, a marker as clear as the hot pants worn by their contemporaries. Yet, this amusement was viewed by authorities with profound suspicion. The resistance to pinball was rooted in an antiquated moral concern. Decades earlier, authorities had successfully banned pinball, fearing it encouraged gambling behavior. Even after flippers were introduced, the stigma remained. In the 1970s, old laws restricting minors were still on the books. Community leaders feared the arcades were dens of iniquity. They saw the pursuit of the high score and the feeding of coins as a corrupting influence, a slippery slope toward wagering. As a result, in certain counties, local ordinances forbade anyone under the age of 18 from operating a pinball machine. Arcades were compelled to comply. The vibrant machines became forbidden fruit. This moral crusade against furniture highlights the deep-seated anxieties of the age. Pinball was eventually exonerated, demonstrating the game's reliance on skill over chance. The eventual legalization of pinball for all ages marked a definitive victory for common sense. The machine that was once feared as a gateway to sin was finally recognized for what it always was: the hidden hand of silk, the ice cream cone, and the horse. A law that even the most creative minds would struggle to find a reason behind. Of all the absurd laws inherited from earlier centuries, none were stranger than the prohibition against carrying an ice cream cone in one's pocket, a statute not about sanitation, but a bizarre historical concern over attracting horses and causing traffic chaos. The 1970s, for all their new freedoms, from the truck bed to the challenging hot pants, retained bureaucratic absurdities. As cities modernized, their law books kept quirky statutes from the days when horsepower meant literal horses. This strange prohibition against pocketed confections is a perplexing example. Imagine a summer afternoon. An ice cream cone is the ideal indulgence. As the confection begins to melt, the thoughtless instinct might be to tuck it away briefly. Yet, in some states, placing it in one's pocket was, unbelievably, to violate the law. But why? The answer, incredibly, lies not with people, but with the horse. To understand this rule, we must journey back to a time before the absolute dominance of the automobile, before the Oldsmobile. City streets were still shared by working horses. Rationale behind the law was rooted in a highly specific concern: equine attraction. A horse, with its keen sense of smell and fondness for sweets, could easily become captivated by the sugary scent emanating from a pocketed cone. A person carrying this lure could inadvertently attract a working horse. The potential for public chaos was real. A horse following a treat could disrupt commerce and cause accidents, the exact type of unmanaged urban scene one might find in the gritty neon of Times Square. Thus, the law was created, a preemptive measure to maintain order, treating the ice cream cone as a potential equine magnet. By the 1970s, the number of working horses had dwindled, rendering the law obsolete, yet there it remained. The prohibition against the pocketed ice cream cone is a charming footnote on the transition from the old American city to the new. It reminds us that even as society was grappling with dangers like asbestos and lead paint, it was still technically bound by the ghosts of traffic jams past. Bathtubs and airflow, the unseen hygiene crisis. You're dreaming of a modern, luxurious bathroom with a sleek, recessed bathtub. The desire for minimalist design clashed unexpectedly with old-world hygiene concerns. The ban on legless bathtubs was a purely practical, almost paranoid regulation aimed at preventing invisible mold and water damage beneath the floor. The 1970s embraced a sleek aesthetic in home design. The clean lines of the modern look, echoing the sophistication of carriers like Trans World Airlines, became highly desirable. In the bathroom, this translated into the dream of a recessed bathtub. However, this preference ran afoul of building codes. The prohibition against installing a bathtub without legs seems illogical today, but it was viewed as a critical public health measure, a necessary defense against the unseen enemy of dampness and decay. The reason was pragmatic: the difficulty of access. A conventional bathtub creates a crucial deliberate air gap between the tub and the floor. This space facilitates air circulation. Without this gap, any leak or splash of water would have nowhere to dry. The resulting moisture underneath the heavy tub would quickly become a breeding ground for mold. Mold harmed the health of occupants, while the trapped moisture compromised the structural integrity of the flooring. Thus, the legs on a bathtub were, in fact, essential public health components. They were the guardians of the subfloor. The refusal of authorities to permit legless tubs was not about aesthetics, but about preventing homeowners from creating a miniature stagnant swamp. This arcane law illustrates the 1970s struggle to balance new design trends with traditional concepts of hygiene. It protected the public not from the grand, visible toxins of asbestos or lead paint, but from the mundane, hidden catastrophe of domestic dampness. Sidewalks and spit, the fight against invisible disease. Spitting in public, even today, is still considered a rude, uncivilized, and impolite act. In the 1970s, expectorating onto the sidewalk wasn't just poor manners. It was a criminal act driven by profound fear. Authorities were determined to prevent the spread of serious illness, turning a minor social flaw into a major public health menace. The sidewalks of the American city were the stage for all manner of social dramas. Yet, the same public space that permitted the hot pants trend and the open sales of cigarettes, a habit once endorsed by doctors, drew a strict, unforgiving line at public spitting. The prohibition against spitting was a lingering law with deep roots in public health crises past. Its enforcement spoke volumes about the era's vigilance against illnesses, most notably pulmonary tuberculosis. In the early 20th century, spitting was understood to be a direct vector for transmitting bacteria. The fear and the associated laws remained firmly in place. To an authority figure, an act of expectoration on the sidewalk was an act of public contamination. The moist matter could spread pathogens that endangered pedestrians. The goal of the ban was twofold: to maintain clean public space, and more critically, to reduce the transmission of airborne illnesses. A police officer issuing a fine for expectoration was acting as a silent protector of the populace's health. The seriousness with which this law was enforced contrasts sharply with the era's casual acceptance of other dangers, such as the invisible toxic fibers of asbestos. It demonstrates that where danger was visible and tied to historical disease, the public will to legislate was firm. Though the laws were not always strictly enforced, their existence remains a powerful reminder of how quickly a simple act can transform into a legal transgression. The flag's integrity, polka dots, and patriotism. The American flag has always been a sacred symbol of national pride. The national flag, the ultimate symbol of unity, was protected by laws so strict that even a whimsical act of creativity, like drawing polka dots on it, was considered a disrespectful and illegal desecration of an emblem. The 1970s, for all its challenging styles, from hot pants to the gritty urban realism of Times Square, was still a nation profoundly committed to its established symbols. The American flag stood as the preeminent, sacred representation of national identity. This reverence was enshrined in federal law, the United States Flag Code. This code details specific protocols for the flag's handling and use. Any modification to the standard design was strictly prohibited. This rule was not intended to stifle artistic expression, but to preserve the flag's integrity. Altering the flag, even with an act as benign as adding polka dots, was regarded as a form of desecration. The seriousness with which this was viewed is a fascinating commentary on the era's patriotic fervor. The flag was seen as a sacred narrative. To modify it was to undermine its symbolic meaning. This reverence stood in sharp contrast to the casual attitude toward public order seen in other areas, such as spitting on the sidewalk. For an individual, attempting to express creativity was a direct confrontation with this reverence. Engaging in such an act in public could lead to intervention by law enforcement. Authorities viewed the modification as a serious breach of protocol. The penalties for such violations were often severe. This legal framework was a powerful statement that, despite the decades' internal conflicts, lines of patriotism were fiercely guarded by the state. The prohibition against unauthorized flag modifications remains a powerful symbol of the tension between personal freedom and national reverence. The memory reflects a time when a simple, painted dot could spark a profound legal consequence. The frowning law, authority, and the power of expression. Frowning at a police officer could land you in trouble with the law. In a time when respect for authority was paramount, the smallest, most natural display of displeasure, a mere frown at a police officer, was considered an illegal act of defiance, showing how deeply ingrained the need for public deference to law enforcement once was. The 1970s, an era of individual rights, paradoxically maintained a profound deference to law enforcement. The police officer was the supreme symbol of law and order. Authorities expected not only compliance, but public respect, a demand that extended even to facial expression. The prohibition against openly displaying displeasure, such as with a frown, seems ludicrous today. It sought to protect the officer's unassailable public authority. In the context of the era, a visible frown could be swiftly interpreted as an act of defiance or insubordination. It was perceived as a direct challenge to the officer's role. The purpose of the law was to eliminate any behavior that might subtly erode the community's trust in the police. For a citizen having a difficult day, perhaps experiencing a breakdown in their Oldsmobile, an unconscious facial expression of frustration could escalate into a legal problem. The citizen was expected to mask all negative emotion with a neutral demeanor. This regulation was common where the emphasis on maintaining visible public order was a top priority. It was a clear message that while the nation was changing, the structure of authority remained rigid. The eventual fading of these specific laws came as individual rights were given greater legal weight. The freedom to dissent, even silently, became recognized as an essential component of liberty. The frowning law is a powerful indicator of the absolute control over public behavior that authorities once wielded. The porch sofa, hazard, fire, students, and upholstery. What's wrong with an old sofa on the porch? Isn't it an ideal place to relax? The seemingly harmless habit of leaving an old sofa on the porch was outlawed, particularly in college towns. This ban wasn't about aesthetics, but a stark, practical fear that flammable upholstered furniture could rapidly turn a porch into a catastrophic fire hazard. The porch has always held a special place in the domestic landscape. For students, the porch offered an inexpensive extension of their cramped quarters. This led to the trend of placing an old, upholstered sofa outdoors. The sight of a comfortable sofa seemed innocent. It promised a place to relax, echoing the casual freedom of pastimes, like the unfettered journey in the truck bed. However, this benign practice held a significant risk that had nothing to do with public expression, contrasting sharply with the laws governing the respectful use of the American flag or the frowning law. This prohibition was about preventing a physical catastrophe. The core of the problem lay in the materials. Older sofas contained highly combustible components. When placed on a wooden porch, they transformed into a massive, easily ignitable fuel source. The risk was manifold. A carelessly discarded cigarette butt or a spark could cause the furniture to ignite. Once started, a fire in the foam and fabric of a sofa could grow with shocking speed. In dense residential areas, this rapid ignition posed a terrifying threat. Authorities recognized that this custom was an unacceptable gamble. They viewed the porch sofa not as quaint seating, but as a highly flammable urban accelerant. They were compelled to intervene with ordinances, banning upholstered furniture on exterior porches. The law was a direct defense against catastrophic loss. The removal of the porch sofa was an act of quiet, necessary governance. It demonstrated that while the 1970s celebrated individual liberty, those freedoms could not compromise the collective security. These 20 forgotten practices reveal a fascinating cultural tapestry, from the chaotic clackers to the quiet enforcement of the frowning law, and from the glamour of the airborne ashtray to the unseen peril of asbestos. The 1970s were a study in contradiction. It was a time that balanced an unparalleled faith in technology and personal liberty with an often shocking disregard for safety, boundaries, and public health. These abandoned practices are more than just obsolete regulations. They are the relics of a golden age of recklessness, reminding us that the rules that govern us today were often purchased at a profound, sometimes painful, price. Share this video with a friend who loves classic history, and let us know your favorite strange law in the comments below.